Taming the High Cost of College, Episode 46.
You have kids, they grow up, and before you know it, it's time to plan for college.
Where do you start?
How much is it going to cost?
Will you qualify for financial aid?
Should you be looking into scholarships?
When will you be able to retire?
What about student loans?
The list of questions is never ending. The good news is, all the answers are right here. Welcome to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Here is your host, certified financial planner, Brad Baldridge.
Hello, and welcome to Taming the High Cost of College. I'm your host, Brad Baldridge. Today we have an interview with Barrett Bogue. He is with the VA, and he's an expert on the post-9/11 GI Bill. And today we're going to talk about how service members can use the GI Bill to help pay for college. There's also an additional benefit for some members of the service that can use the GI Bill and transfer those benefits to their spouse and children. Typically, the transferability is a benefit that's provided for somebody that re-opts and goes into the military for even longer service after their initial 3 or 4 years. So if you have that benefit, there's a lot of possibilities in using that benefit to help pay for college for your children. And I think there's a lot of great things that you can do. I learned so much at this interview that I actually went online and looked at the GI Bill comparison tool and learned a bunch more. And I've created a video that will help you understand the comparison tool. And I also put together a couple scenarios and ran some numbers to give you an example of how the GI Bill and transferring it to your children may work for some families and some things that you need to pay attention to and how it may all work. So if you're interested in that, you can go to Taming the High Cost of College /46, where the show notes are, and click on the button to sign up for our email newsletter. And we'll also then send you information on how to get to the video and a couple documents that will help you along the way and give you some additional great information. All right, so let's jump into the interview with Barrett. All right, today we're sitting down with Barrett Bogue. He is with the Department of Veteran Affairs. And today we're going to talk a lot about the GI Bill. Welcome, Barrett.
Hi, Brett. Thanks so much for the opportunity to come and talk to you all about the GI Bill.
All right. Well, great. Before we jump into the details of the GI Bill, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got involved in what you do?
Sure. I have worked at the Department of Veterans Affairs since 2007 in what's called the Office of Education Service, and we're responsible for paying and administering the GI Bill, of which the most popular one is the post-9/11 GI Bill, and we'll get into that in a bit. I am the team leader for public relations and digital engagement, and my staff and I are responsible for raising awareness, educating, and promoting this great education benefit program. And my biggest claim to fame is that I am a product of the GI Bill. I used the GI Bill to earn 2 degrees at the University of Tennessee before I joined VA.
Great. All right, so let's jump into a little bit. Can you explain just kind of quick overview? I think you mentioned there's post-9/11 GI Bill, so that would imply that there's multiple GI Bills. And can you give us the basics on what the GI Bill is?
I absolutely will, Brad. The post-9/11 GI Bill is by far the most popular GI Bill out there, and it's the one that most everybody qualifies for. Before we get into details about the post-9/11 GI Bill, I want to explain what it's not, okay? The post-9/11 GI Bill is not a loan. It's not a grant. It's not a scholarship. It's not associated with federal financial aid. The GI Bill is an entitlement program similar to Social Security, and it's an earned benefit. So if you serve in the military for 3 years or more, you're going to qualify for the post-9/11 GI Bill after you leave the service. And generally, the post-9/11 GI Bill will make a payment to the school for tuition and fees, and a payment to you for a monthly housing allowance, and then a yearly payment of up to $1,000 a year for the books and supplies stipend.
Okay, so that would be the person that serves in the military.
Correct. And you also have an opportunity to transfer that if you so choose. Now, the transferability portion of the post-9/11 GI Bill, one critical thing to remember is that it is a recruitment and retention incentive with the Department of Defense. So how that works is if you serve 6 years or more in the military, you're going to have an opportunity to sign on or separate from the military. Now, the transferability provisions come in when they will offer you the ability to transfer the post-11 GI Bill if you agree to serve more time in the military. Typically, it's 4 years, but that varies by branch of service. And when you incur and serve that additional obligation, you're actually able to transfer the post-11 GI Bill to your dependents. It could be your spouse, it could be your children, but you are permitted to do that. And then when they are of age and they apply for the GI Bill, we treat them just like the veteran, as if they were the veteran, and they are qualified to use the GI Bill.
Okay, so I guess in a nutshell then, there's certainly the young people that do the typical military service. So, assuming my audience is mostly parents, your children, when they're, instead of going straight to college, could go the military route and then use their benefits at college. But there's also parents out there that might be more of a career soldier who have been involved in the military for 6, 10, 20 years or whatever it might be. They may have benefits that they can use themselves or transfer to their children. So there's kind of two variables there.
Yeah,
is that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement. I do want to add a third one. It's the Marine Gunnery Sergeant Fry Scholarship. The Fry Scholarship, it's called the Fry Scholarship, but it's still it's not technically, it's not a scholarship, but it's called the Fry Scholarship. And it's under the post-11 GI Bill. It's really the third and final aspect. And if your spouse, or if a service member is killed in the line of duty, your spouse and children are eligible for the post-11 GI Bill. So I make that a separate point because I don't want people to confuse it with transferability. So I would just reiterate that when a spouse is killed in action, every member of that family is eligible for their own post-9/11 GI Bill. And children are eligible starting on their 18th birthday. And typically, they have about 15 years from the date of the service member death to use the benefit.
Okay. So then, right. So that would be the third benefit.
Right,
Okay.
the Fry Scholarship.
So let's talk a little bit about what the benefit actually amounts to. Is it pretty much the same in all three categories as far as, I know there's some dollar amounts that you mentioned and some of those things?
It pretty much works the same in all three categories. And so the couple key points to remember. When you're eligible for the post-9/11 GI Bill, generally you have 15 years from the last day you separated from service to use it. So whenever you leave the military, or whenever your child leaves the military, they've got 15 years to use the post-9/11 GI Bill. In addition to that, everybody gets 36 months of entitlement. Okay, and so I call that like pulling from a pot, and you've got 36 months to use however you want. And when you go to school full time,
Quick question. Yeah. So 36 months. When we talk about a school year, is a school year 9 months of the 36, or is a school year 12 months of the 36?
That's a good question. A school year is whatever the school reports to VA. Typically, though, it is 9 months.
Okay, so the September through May of a typical college, that's 9 months, and therefore it's essentially about 4 years of college education.
That's exactly right.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt, but
no, it's
burning
fine.
question.
I just, I appreciate that. That's a great question, Brad. Which just highlights the fact that it's so critical. When you're transferring your benefits, you've still got 36 months. So if you've got 2 children, you can divide that in half, or if you want to give some to your spouse, you can divide that into thirds. But ultimately, you only get 36 months to transfer to your dependents. The post-9/11 GI Bill, just in terms of how the payments are structured, I want to do a really quick overview of each part of it. So there's the tuition and fee payment. And the tuition and fee payment varies by what kind of school you attend. If you go to a public school, let's just say a 4-year university, then we pay whatever the tuition and fee charges are. There's no cap if you go to a public school. However, if you go to a private school or a for-profit school, a private for-profit school, then there is actually a national maximum amount of what you can get per academic year. And right now it's about $20,000 a year. So again, to reiterate, you go to public school, there's no cap on how much we'll cover for your tuition and fees. But if you go to a private school, it's capped at about $20,000 a year.
Okay.
And the second portion is the monthly housing allowance. Now, this is a payment that we make to you, to the individual, and it's based on the, if your listeners are in the military, it's based on the basic allowance for housing rate for an E5 with dependents that the zip code of the school is in. And you can go on our website, you can learn more about what the rate is, but it's essentially a monthly stipend that's paid in arrears that you receive while you're attending school. And then the third and final payment would be up to $1,000 a year for a books and supply stipend. And that's apportioned based on the number of credit hours that you're taking, and it's paid at the beginning of the term.
Okay. So that housing stipend that you mentioned, does it get close to covering a typical college's room and board? Like in the Midwest, room and board might be about $8,000, $10,000 for the, I know in like New York City, it would be, $15,000, but does it get close to that, or is it pretty big gap typically?
I don't know, Brad. I would say it gets close to covering the living expenses associated with that area, but because it's not based on the room cost for room and board, I really don't want to. I'd be venturing a guess, and I don't want to do that.
Okay, well, we'll look into that a little bit, and if I can find out some real numbers, then we'll put them out on the website in the show notes. All right, did you tell us what the dollar amount is? As far as cap, if you do go to a private school.
It's based on an academic year, okay? So our academic year is from August to July. And between August and July, if you go to a private school, we'll pay up to $20,000. Let's see, $20,235.02, I kid you not, towards tuition and fees if you go to a private school.
Okay, that 2 cents will certainly make a difference, won't it?
It does, and it's actually that amount adjusts at the beginning of every academic year. There's a formula that we use, I guess you could call it a cost of living adjustment or a cost of education adjustment that we apply. So there's going to be a new amount a new cap that will start in August, but I don't have that amount yet.
Okay, so if I'm a 18-year-old student or a parent of an 18-year-old student, we're saying, all right, well, military is an opportunity that we're seriously considering.
Mm-hmm.
Is it just about any branch of the military? Is it any job within those branches of the military as long as we get in 3 years of service? Or is there a pick and choose kind of, how does that work?
It's any branch, and it's including the Coast Guard, Brad. And it's any type of job that you may have in the military. What we look for is the type of active duty service that is done, and almost all of it qualifies for the post 9/11 GI Bill to the point where we don't even try and distinguish it here. Where it may get a little tricky is if you go into the reserves.
Okay.
And if you go into the reserves, your reserve time is not going to count towards the GI Bill. It's only when you serve on active duty that counts towards the GI Bill. So whatever branch of service you're in, I was in the Marine Corps. I was activated for a little under a year when I went to Iraq, and when I came back, that year qualified me for an older GI Bill program that I used to get my master's degree. I didn't receive nearly as much money as a student today would under the post 9/11 GI Bill. But if your son or daughter is going into the military, into the Army, and they do 3 years in the Army on active duty, they're going to qualify for the post 9/11 GI Bill. Now, the big distinction here is that you have to be honorably discharged. If you're dishonorably discharged or something else, you're not going to qualify for the GI Bill at all.
Okay. Now, how do colleges view this and participate in this? I'm assuming that because it's such a big program that most colleges are at least familiar with it. Is that true?
Yes, Brad, since we started paying the Post-11 GI Bill in 2009, we've paid out approximately $52 billion in education benefits under the GI Bill, which is significant. And we have seen a significant increase in the number of people using the GI Bill and in the schools around the country. And our support to those schools has increased accordingly. We have very good relationships with the institutions across the country with the Post-11 GI Bill. And we provide a lot of support to them in helping service members transition from the military into the schools. So to answer your question, there is a high level of interest, and we communicate, on a weekly basis and trying to help veterans transition and use the GI Bill.
Okay. Now, how does the GI Bill impact things like financial aid?
The Post-11 GI Bill, I mentioned that we make a tuition and fee payment to the school. All right, so the individual is never going to see that money. If you're going to an expensive private school, we're not going to pay $20,000 to you for you to give to your school. We actually we send that to the institution on your behalf. So we pay the net cost for tuition and fees. So when these schools verifies that you're enrolled, they're going to report to VA several different things. First off, they're going to tell us who you are. They're going to tell us you're enrolled in the school. They're going to tell us how many credit hours you're taking, what you're majoring in, and then they're going to tell us what the school is charging you. And when they do that, they're going to actually back out any scholarships or financial aid that you've received that are being applied towards your tuition fees. So if you're receiving a scholarship, because you're a veteran, if you're receiving federal financial aid that's being applied towards tuition and fees, that amount is backed out, subtracted, and then the school will report the net cost to VA, and then we process a payment and send it to the school.
Okay. So, and then next year when I fill out my FAFSA, do I treat that like a scholarship? Would that impact next year's award?
No. The Post-11 GI Bill is not income, so you do not have to report that.
Great. Okay. So then the mechanics of it, then, if you're going to school, is there someone at the school that you would work with to let them know you've activated the GI stuff, or do you deal with someone at the VA, or both?
Well, it's a little bit of both, and it works pretty seamlessly. When you can apply online to use the Post-11 GI Bill, you go online, it probably takes about 20 to 30 minutes, and you submit your application electronically. We take that information, we communicate seamlessly with the Department of Defense if we have to verify any service records or anything about your parent. We take that information, and a person will review it and then verify that you are entitled to the Post-11 GI Bill. When we do that, we send what's called a certificate of eligibility. I call it the golden ticket. You don't want to lose this thing. You want to hold on to it. But what we do is we snail mail a certificate of eligibility to the address on record. That certificate of eligibility will say what you're entitled to and how long you're entitled to receive it. Typically, I recommend that when an individual is interested in a school, that they find the representative who processes the GI Bill at that institution and provide them the certificate of eligibility. That individual is usually in the financial aid office, the registrar's office, or the bursar's office. And most institutions, if you go to their website, you'll be able to search and find out who that is. Every school has a school certifying official. Okay, that's the person I just spoke about. They're called the school certifying official. They're not a VA employee. They are a school employee. That individual is responsible for reporting to us when you're enrolled. So once you have your certificate of eligibility, the only thing you should do is, once you're accepted into the school and you're enrolled, is go to that school certifying official, let them know you're eligible for the GI Bill, provide them your certificate of eligibility, and then from then on out, what the school certifying official will probably do is just have you let them know what your enrollment is going to be, what you're studying, what credit hours. When I went to Tennessee at the beginning of the semester, I had to go see my school certifying official and fill out some paperwork and let her know what I was taking, and she would take that and submit it to VA. So again, once you get your certificate of eligibility, it's paramount that you take it to the school certifying official at the institution you want to attend. And from then on out, it's between VA and the school certifying official.
Okay. So that process seems like it should go relatively smoothly. Now, does it matter? Can you skip using it here and there? Can you use it for grad school? What kind of planning might you consider with when you take your benefit? Is there...
one tip that I have, and I tell everybody, is it's where you go to school first with the GI Bill is critical. Because you only have 36 months, you need to be very strategic about what you use it on. And to the first part of your question, you can go and enroll in school and tell your school certifying official, hey, I don't want to use my GI Bill this semester, or I want to wait 2 semesters and then start using it again. You can start and stop however you want, as long as you notify the school certifying officials so they can tell us. When it comes to thinking strategically, if, let's say, for example, you want to go to a community college. Well, we do pay for people to go to community colleges. And then you want to transfer to a 4-year institution. Well, you've got to make sure that every credit you earn at that community college is going to transfer over to the 4-year school, because you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you've used 12 months at a community college and none of the under the GI Bill, and none of the credits transfer over to the 4-year school. So again, where you go to school first under the post 11 GI Bill is critical. Now, what's one of the things that's most misunderstood about our program is everybody knows that you can use it to get an undergraduate degree, but you can also use it to get a graduate degree, a doctorate degree, a law degree. And again, because these are advanced degrees and you only have 36 months, if you know you're going to go to law school, or if you know you want to get your doctorate, it may be better for you to wait and use your post-11 GI Bill until that time.
Okay, and that would apply. So, interesting. So if I'm a Illinois resident and I go to Illinois State, it's going to cover the full tuition plus give me some housing allowance and book allowance. If I'm going to Illinois State for my PhD, it will also cover tuition even though it's higher, no matter what the tuition is?
Yes. If you go to Illinois State Law School, as long as it's a public in-state institution, we will pay for the tuition and fees.
All right. When you say public in-state, that means I need to be a resident of Illinois?
That's correct.
All right. So if you're in the military and happen to coming home from Germany, let's say, how do you know what state you actually live in?
Well, we are in the process of implementing a change to the post-11 GI Bill called the resident rate requirements. And it actually doesn't go into effect until next month, until the beginning of July. But the premise is this, that after July, so long as your state complies with the provisions of this law, anybody who separates within 3 years of separating from the military will be able to qualify for the in-state tuition and fees. So if this person from Germany moves to Illinois, then they would be able to, the Illinois state would be able to charge in-state tuition and fees to that person, so long as they're within 3 years of separating from the military. And that's a brand new thing. I'm glad you brought it up, that I'm able to talk about it here, and people can learn more about it on our website. And what we're doing right now is we're trying to get every state and territory to comply with this and offer in-state tuition and fees to veterans, and we're very close to getting everybody to do so. and that doesn't start until July 1st.
Okay, so there's some planning, we can use it for grad school. So if you think you're in line for 6 or 8 years of school, you may want to try and use it for the school that is going to be the most expensive.
Exactly.
If your grad school happens to be at a private school, I assume that same $20,000 limit applies?
It does apply, but we also have a matching program called the Yellow Ribbon Program. The Yellow Ribbon Program is a matching program whereby VA and the private school will agree to pay for will agree to offset the unmet cost. So if I went to George Washington and it's $40,000 a year, all right, the cap is $20,000. So that's an unmet need of an additional $20,000. If we enter into a Yellow Ribbon agreement with GW, they would agree to pay $10,000 and we would match that $10,000. And by doing so, we're able to, between the two of us, we're able to offset all of the cost for GW. And you can learn more about the Yellow Ribbon Program on our website, but the Yellow Ribbon Program is designed to increase the number of opportunities for veterans to attend private schools. So that's just one more thing that you need to consider in your planning, that in the state where you live, or even just around you, there may be a private institution that participates in the Yellow Ribbon Program, and it is possible that all of your tuition and fees will still be paid for under that program.
All right, and the Yellow Ribbon Program applies to undergrad and grad?
That's a good question. The Yellow Ribbon Program, we actually, the schools can apply restrictions. So because of the cost, a school can say, all right, we're going to participate in Yellow Ribbon, but only for undergrad students, and we're going to only give it to the first 300 or 500. Other schools will say, you know what, we're going to participate in the Yellow Ribbon Program no matter what, no matter whether or not they're in undergrad or a graduate program. We're not going to have any sort of limits on it. It's really critical that when you start researching this on our website, you pay very close attention to any restrictions that a school may have. Most schools don't have restrictions, but some do.
Okay, so the Yellow Ribbon Program is also a separate website, or just an addition onto the existing websites?
It's all this information that I'm talking to you about is found on our website at benefits.va.gov/GI Bill.
All right, and we're going to put a link to that in the show notes so you don't have to try and be writing that down while you're driving. Yeah, this is a lot of great information. Let's spend just a couple of minutes focusing on the career soldier that we mentioned earlier, someone that has enough service so that they generate a benefit that they're allowed to transfer to their family. Can you tell who can you transfer that to as far as transferring your GI benefit?
Well, you're able to transfer it to your spouse and to your children. And there's a couple things to remember when you're permitted to do this. Number one, you actually do it through DoD's payment system. It's called DEERS, and anybody who's in the armed forces should be very familiar with DEERS. So if your spouse or child shows up in DEERS, you're able to allocate up to 36 months of entitlement between them. The key thing here is that after you separate from the military, you're not able to allocate entitlement to a new person. So if you're in the military and you have a child, and then you allocate 36 months of the post-11 GI Bill to him, then you get out of the military and you have another child, a daughter, you're not able to move that entitlement over to her. So when you're in the military, what I recommend you do, if you're in the military and you're approved to transfer benefits, you immediately transfer 1 month of entitlement to everybody in your family. And that way, when you get out, you can move those months around as you see fit.
Okay, so if you allocate 1 month to your spouse and 1 month to all 3 kids, let's say, so you've allocated 4 months out, 32 months still remains with the owner, so to speak. And then sometime in the future, you can say, well, little Johnny is in fact going to college, and he's the one that we need the benefit for. So we're going to transfer from mom to him so that he gets, 25 of the 36 months. And then sometime in the future, we'll figure out who's going to use the last 11.
Right. I do, and you're spot on. I see that quite often where they've allocated the 1 month, and their child goes to school, is accepted at an institution and gets a full ride. Gets a scholarship that pays for almost everything, or they've had a college savings plan that's done really well, and quite frankly, they don't need the GI Bill. Well, that's fine. Then they can take that entitlement away from that child and allocate the rest of it to the other child if they want to.
Okay. Now, and you make that decision prior to separating from service. Is that what you told us?
Yeah, you make the decision for who you transfer it to prior to separating. After you separate, you can move those months around to whomever you want, but you cannot allocate it to a new person after you separate.
Okay. So as I'm thinking about it, does the Yellow Ribbon program apply to children as well?
The Yellow Ribbon program applies to children, but it does not apply to spouses with transferred entitlement.
Okay. Well, that's interesting.
It is.
All right. So as part of the planning process, then again, you may want to, as an example, intentionally allocate your GI Bill to someone that is if you have 2 kids, one's going to a state school where the tuition is, say, $10,000, and another one's going to George Washington University that we mentioned earlier, whose tuition is in the neighborhood of $40,000. It may make sense for you to pay cash for the $8,000 tuition or loans or other family assets for the $8,000 and use the GI Bill at the much more expensive school, get the $20,000 for sure, and maybe Yellow Ribbon on top of that.
Absolutely.
Fair assessment? Okay.
It is, and I do see that happening today.
Okay. And then, so those decisions can be made. So you could essentially allocate 1 month to everybody in the family. Let's say you're separating from service, and let's say dad's in the military. He retires at 42, makes his decisions, but his kids are, 8, 10, and 12. So it's like, well, I don't know which of them are going to college. I certainly don't know where they're going to college. I'm going to give each kid 1 month. I'm going to give mom 1 month in case she wants to go back to grad school or something sometime in the future. Then he separates from service. 5 or 10 years later, the kids are now applying to colleges, and he's noticing that, little Johnny's, as mentioned, is going to go to George Washington University, and little Susie's going to go to the local state school. They can work with their overall college plan and then switch things around at that time.
That's right.
And then if little Susie, who's applying to George Washington, hits it out of the park and gets a full ride, they can essentially undo that and go back the other way and say, well,
exactly.
We'll take it at the state school. It's not as much, but it's, it's the only way we'll get any benefit at all. So we'll go ahead and take it. All right, great. Well, this has been a lot of great information. Is there anything else that we maybe haven't quite covered yet? I know I learned a ton, and I think a lot of people will appreciate this.
Brad, we have covered a lot. And again, I want to thank you and certainly your audience members for this opportunity. Well, if I could, I do have some tips that I want to give, if that's okay.
Yeah, let's jump into that. If you've got a couple quick tips, that's where we like to end. So go ahead.
Yeah, so I've covered most of this, but really 3 things that I would emphasize to your audience. If you're in the military right now and you're even thinking about transferring your benefits, go ahead and do so. Go ahead and apply to transfer while you're in the military. Because I have seen so many times and heard so many times from somebody who retired and said, I wish I had transferred my GI Bill while I was in the military. And unfortunately, after you leave, after you're retired, it's not possible to transfer your entitlement. And then where you go to school first matters. It is one of the most critical decisions that you're going to make when using the GI Bill. Now, you can use the GI Bill, like we explained here, at all kinds of different places, but you only have 36 months of entitlement. And so where you use that first is going to be critical to your success in college. And then finally, before you even apply to the GI Bill, if you're a parent whose child is considering joining the military, if you're an individual who wants to join the military, or if you're on active duty right now, become an informed consumer first before you apply to the GI Bill. we have this great tool called the GI Bill comparison tool, and we'll have a link up for it. But the GI Bill comparison tool is it's a tool designed to estimate how much your GI Bill is going to cost. And it doesn't matter if you're a spouse, it doesn't matter if you're a child, it doesn't matter if you're using transferred entitlement. It will calculate that based on all the scenarios. And not only that, but we have information on all 35,000 plus approved programs in the comparison tool. So when you go in and search for George Washington or Illinois State, it'll pull up information on that school. And it will show you the school's graduation rate, it will show the median borrowing amount, and it will show the average student debt. And we pull that information from the Department of Education. So we try and provide you through the comparison tool with as much information as you need to make the right decision. It will show you how much you'll get in the yellow ribbon if you qualify, and in the end, it will also show you how much you'll get in your housing allowance. So it does all of the calculating for you. So be an informed consumer first before you ever apply to the GI Bill, Brad.
All right, great. And again, we're going to put links to all the websites we've talked about and any other information in the show notes available at our website, Taming the High Cost of College. If people want to get more information or talk to someone, are there ways that, other than the websites, ways that people can get information, or is there a helpline or anything like that?
1-888-GI-BILL-1. You can call anytime, Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Central Time. That's 1-888-GI-BILL-1.
Great. And we'll put that in the notes as well for those of you that are driving. But again, I appreciate it, Barrett. I think we've all learned a great deal, and we'll talk to you again soon, I'm sure.
Thank you, Brad.
All right. Well, I learned a lot from that interview. Hopefully you did too. As a reminder, information is available at tamingthehighcostofcollege/46. That's where the show notes are for this particular episode. And again, I've created a video that will give you a tour of the GI Bill comparison tool and get you up and running on that great benefit there. And also some documents that show you how you can take advantage of the GI Bill and some things to watch out for. That's all we have for today, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Now it's time for you to take action. Head to tamingthehighcostofcollege.com for show notes, bonus content, and to leave feedback for Brad. The next step on your college journey starts now.
Brad Baldridge is a registered representative of Cambridge Investment Research and an investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Securities are offered through Cambridge Investment Research Incorporated, a broker-dealer and member of FINRA and SIPC. Brad owns two companies, Baldridge Wealth Management and Baldridge College Solutions. The Baldridge companies are not affiliated with Cambridge Investment Research.